Music is a big subject. So we're only going to focus on, really two today, but we're going to focus on 4 elements of music. First one is pitch. A pitch is the frequency of a sound wave. So how many times per second a string or vocal folds or a reed or a brass instrument, whatever, vibrates. The more vibrations per second, and by the way, that's the same thing as hertz when you see Hz. Like your television has a refresh rate of 60 hertz or 120 hertz. That means that picture is refreshing either once every second or once every half second. So the higher the frequency, the higher the hertz number, then the higher the pitch is perceived to be. So the fewer vibrations per second, then the lower the pitch is perceived to be. So I tell people, we hear a pitch and we say, oh, that's really high. It's not really high, it's really fast. We perceive it, and we call it high, but what it is, it's really fast. It's a lot of vibrations per second, and when something vibrates more slowly, we perceive that as lower. Like if you ever took a piece of plastic tubing and swing it around, if you do it really, really fast, you get a higher pitch. You do it really, really slow, you get a lower pitch. Or everybody's played with a rubber band before, and the tighter you stretch that rubber band, it makes a higher pitch. We perceive that as higher pitch because it's vibrating faster, and when it's loose, it's vibrating more slowly. All right, so the next element we're going to look at is rhythm. Now, rhythm is distinct from the beat. The beat of a piece of music is the overall pulse, while rhythm is the word we use to describe the relationship of durations of sound in a piece of music. Some sounds are longer, some are shorter, but they occur in certain combinations of durations with recognizable patterns. So if you are at a dance and you hear a combination of long and short that's like tap, 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 that's a cha-cha, right? If you hear that's swing, so that's either going to be the East Coast swing or a Lindy Hop or something of that nature, okay? Those are rhythms, okay? Pieces of music could have the same basic beat, but the pattern of sounds in them is different, and we call those patterns rhythms. All right, and we'll talk, there are 2 more I wanted to be aware of. We're not going to talk about them that much today. We will talk about them in future sessions, but for now we'll just list them. There is volume, also known as dynamics. If pitch is the frequency of a sound wave, then volume is the amplitude of the sound wave, how big it is, okay? The larger the amplitude, the louder the volume, and the smaller the amplitude, the softer the volume. And our voices are capable of producing an incredibly wide range of volume. And the next one is timbre. And that word is timbre, it's not timber. Timbre is what you yell when you're cutting down a tree. Timbre is the shape of a sound wave, the actual shape of the sound wave. If you have a synthesizer, you can produce just a pure sine wave. It just sounds like an electronic tone, okay? That's just a sine wave, okay? We don't produce perfect sine waves with our voices. No instrument produces a perfect sine wave. All of the instruments you can think of produce waves that have little bumps and nicks and wobbly things on them. And the difference in the shapes of those waves determines the difference of timbre. So timbre is affected by factors such as what the instrument is made of, whether it's brass or whether it's made of wood or plastic. Is the vibration caused by buzzing of the lips? Is it caused by a vibration of a reed against your bottom lip? Or 2 reeds vibrating together, or your vocal folds vibrating together? Is it caused by a string being plucked, or a string being strummed, or a bow being drawn across the strings? All of these things help determine timbre. In the human voice, our voices sound different, right? Different people have different sounding voices. The timbre of your voice is determined by the size and shape of the length and the thickness of the vocal folds, and the size and shape of your sinus cavities. Isn't that romantic? That's why your voice sounds. So if you really like somebody's voice, you really love the size and shape of their sinus cavities. So isn't that a nice thought? All right, so we're going to turn our attention to what's called the diatonic scale. Diatonic, dia, from the Greek meaning two, and tonic from the word for tone. So two tones, or two types of relationships between the tones in the scale. We call these whole steps and half steps. With a whole step, there's actually another tone between the two. It's called a semitone. So, for example, from do to re, that is what we call a whole step. If we go do, re, okay, that's a whole step because there's actually one in between. It's do, di, re. You hear that? Do, di, re. There's a tone in between those two. So when we go do, re, that's called a whole step. And most of these steps on this stairs, these stair steps, are whole steps. But two of them are half steps. Now these are the hand signs that I was just doing without thinking about it. I'm going to try to do this so that they're not blocked by my laptop here. So we have these hands are in the colors of the spectrum, which is helpful too. So we start with do, and we go from here, do, re, that's re, mi, and then fa, and then sol, la, ti, do. So do is here and do is here. Now, two of those shapes tell us where the half steps are. Here's one, and here's the other. So this is fa, and so you notice it's pointing down. Fa points down to mi. Fa is really close to mi. That's a half step. Do, re, mi, fa, mi, fa, mi, fa. That's a half step. And then sol, la, ti, do, ti, do, ti, do. That's the other half step. Ti points up to do. Ti really wants to go up to do. We call that a leading tone. Ti, do. And when we sing it, we have to sing it really high because it wants to lead up to do. Ti, do. All right? So this is do. And we go do, re, with the hand rising. Re is rising. Mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and back down. Ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. All right. And so as we make the shapes, our hand is rising as the pitch goes up, and our hand comes down as the pitch goes down. All right. So we're going to start with a song that has almost all that whole scale in it at the beginning. There's a little, there's a skip, but it comes really close. We're going to look at two hymn tunes that both coincidentally are associated with texts by Isaac Watts. And so we're going to look at the first one first. And the first one, this represents the tune, the first line of the tune, Duke Street. Duke Street was written in 1793 by John Warrington Hatton, who was from Warrington, Lancashire, and it is believed he lived on Duke Street in Warrington, Lancashire, hence the name of the tune. So you see, in the first phrase of Duke Street, we skip over re, but otherwise we go all the way up the scale, and then we come down, stopping on so. So it goes do, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so. Try that with me. Some of you already did. Excellent. Let's try that together. Do, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so. So we went all the way up the scale, just skipping re, but we went all the way up, and then we came about halfway down to so. All right? Now we'll come back to Duke Street in a few minutes, but let's look real quickly at another. This represents the first phrase of the hymn tune, Antioch. Antioch was written by a man named Lowell Mason. Mason claimed that this tune was adapted from George Friedrich Handel, but it's not. It's just Mason trying to sound like Handel. So we see that the beginning of this tune is kind of the exact opposite of the beginning of Duke Street. Duke Street started at the bottom of the scale and went up, and Antioch starts at the top of the scale and goes down, just right down the scale. Do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. Do that with me. Do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. You can't see that? Okay. All right. Now, we're going to leave Antioch. We're going to go back to Duke Street for just a moment. We're going to sing the phrase together, but we're going to sing it as it occurs within the actual hymn tune, Duke Street, okay? In other words, it doesn't go do, mi, fa, so, like that. It goes do, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do, ti, la, so, right? Let's try that together. Do, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so. One more time. Do, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so. Now, when we sang it just then, all the tones weren't the same, were they? Some were longer and some were shorter, right? We didn't linger on each tone for the same amount of time. In other words, we sang it in rhythm. Okay? We sang the correct rhythm for that hymn tune. And just as we have ways to represent pitch, we also have ways to represent rhythm. And here's what that looks like. Oh boy, don't worry, don't panic. The universe is much safer when you bring a towel. All right. So imagine that you're in the kitchen and you're baking a cake. And you need 1 cup of milk. Okay? So you reach in the cupboard and you pull out the 1 cup measuring cup. And you fill it to the top. You got a cup of milk, right? Great. Okay, that's kind of like that first one on the left. It's called a whole note. So if I need a whole, exactly. It's also called a semi-brev. You don't have to know that. But it's there. It's up there for you just in case you're curious. All right. So you got a whole cup of milk. That's like a whole note in music, okay? All right. Now, a whole note or semi-brev, as you see, gets 4 counts. It gets 4 counts. Now, we'll look at the relationships between those in just a minute. Now, so imagine you're making that cake. You need that cup of milk. But the 1 cup measuring cup is dirty and you're too lazy to wash it. So you reach into the cupboard and you pull out the half cup measuring cup. It's the shorter one, right? It's a little shorter than the 1 cup. So how many times are you going to have to fill that cup to get a cup of milk? Twice, right? You got to go like this, and you go like this, so you can get 1 cup of milk, right? So two of those will fill the 1 cup measuring cup, right? 2 of the half cups will fill the 1 cup measuring cup. So that's like this next one. We take that whole note, we slap a stem on it, and when we do that, we cut its value in half. That's why it's called a half, because it's a half of a whole. A half of a whole cup of milk is a half, and a half note is a half of a whole note. So far, I think that's pretty logical, right? Okay, so that means we got to have 2 of them. If a whole note gets 4 counts, then a half note gets 2. Makes sense, right? Okay. The half cup measuring cup is dirty also. And I'm not going to wash it. So I'm going to reach in, I'm going to get the quarter cup measuring cup. So I got to fill it how many times? 4 times, right? I got to fill it 4 times to get a whole cup of milk. So that's like this next one. We take that half note, we color in that dot, and by doing so, we have cut its value in half. So now I got to have 4 of those to make a whole. It takes 4 of them to equal a whole cup, right? It takes 4 quarter cups to equal a whole cup of milk. It takes 4 quarter notes to equal a whole note. So each quarter note gets 1 count. Each half note gets 2 counts. Each whole note gets 4 counts. Everybody with me so far? All right. So if the whole cup, the half cup, and the quarter cup are all dirty, now I got to reach for the coffee scoop, which is 1 ounce, or 1/8 of a cup. 8 ounces in a cup. So, you didn't know this was going to be a cooking class too, did you? So it takes 8 of those to equal a whole note. That's why we call it an 8th note. It's an 1/8 of a whole. So we've taken the quarter note, we draw a flag on it, and in doing so, we have cut its value in half yet again. We can do that again. We can go from the coffee scoop to a tablespoon, and it would take 16 of those. How many knew that there were 2 tablespoons in an ounce? Stephanie, very good, very good. So it would take 16 tablespoons to equal a cup of milk. So we take that 8th note, we draw another flag on it, and we have, in drawing another flag, we have cut its value in half. So it would take 16 of those suckers to make it. Now, can we get smaller than that? Sure we can, yeah. If we add a 3rd flag, we could cut its value in half yet again and get a 32nd note. The 8th note is also called a quaver. 16th note is also called a semiquaver. If we put a 3rd flag, we would have a 32nd note or a demisemiquaver. If we added another flag, we'd have a 64th note or a hemidemisemiquaver. Don't worry, you're not going to run into those in hymn singing. You will rarely run into a 16th note in hymn singing. We just don't typically sing that fast. We're going to run into one today, but it's a tune you already know, so we're safe. All right. So, how would we clap and say this rhythm? Very simple. Let's try that with me. This is going to be taxing, I know. 1, 2, go. Ta, 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 ta. Everything's the same, right? It's all the same. That's what we call that isorhythmic, same rhythm. It's all the same. All right? Now we're going to go to the original rhythm of Old Hundredth, which looks like that. So you see we got quarter notes, but then we have some half notes also. All right? So how would we say this rhythm? Let's take a look. There we go. Try that with me. 1, 2, go. Ta, 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 ta. All right, so very good. That's the rhythm. Now, what about the pitches? All right, so here we are. This is do now. Here we go. Do, do, ti, la, so, do, re, mi. Try that with me again. Here's do. Do, do, ti, la, so, do, re, mi. Very good.